Probably wondering why I'm here today. Strange enough, Berkey wasn't available. And then I'm asked to say a few words about one of the most complex individuals that I have had the pleasure of meeting. So I thought we'd get to the facts first. He's native Torontonian, graduate University of Western Ontario. He was a reporter for both the Calgary Herald, then the Calgary Sun, then the Calgary Herald, and then he came to the Toronto Sun before he became a columnist in 1989. He's worked at the Fan, he's worked at TSN. He's covered 14 Olympics, he's covered 31 Stanley Cups, he's done Grey Cups, he's done Super Bowls, he's done the Vanier Cup, particularly when Western was in it. He's done the NBA, he's done championship boxing, he's an author, and more importantly than that, he's a proud Canadian, but more importantly than that, a proud family man. This is the macro view of Steve Simmons. And each one of those areas I could give you a story about one of them, whether it's an event, whether it's a particular game or whatever it might be. But those are the facts. But what do we know him as a person? Well, first of all, he has an inquisitive mind. That we all know. He is fearless, and there's no question about that. He has a sense of integrity that nobody can question. He is relentless when he gets something going, and he's a pit bull with his commitment. He has a sense of humor. And I think that the most important part about Steve, when I think about him, is that when you look at him or he's had some type of an interview with you, it's the way that he moves his head. The eyes go up, the head's around. You can be in the middle of the Rogers Center, and there's nobody there. It cannot be bugged, and you think that there's somebody listening to your story. But that's our man, Steve. He has a style. There's no question about that, and I think that we see that style in his weekly column at the end of the pages in the sports of the Sun on the Sundays. But let me say this: I have been on the wrong side of Steve Simmons. He has called me out. He has called the Blue Jays out. He has always said it the way that he thinks it should be. And let me say, he has not always been right. But he's not always been wrong. But he's always given me pause for thought. That's what I like about Steve Simmons. I've only got 2 minutes to talk about Steve, and I want to finish up with one thing that I read in the paper, strangely enough, in the Globe and Mail. And strangely enough, not in the sports section. But because I am, try to think that I am open and honest and give credit where credit's due, Elizabeth Renzetti wrote the other day, "Journalists are meant in part to act as proxy citizens, to ask questions you would ask if you were lucky enough to buttonhole that individual yourself." I think that captures Steve. He's not afraid to ask the tough question. But more importantly than that, he's not afraid to show up that night, the next day, or whenever it might be. I'd ask George Gross Jr. to come up here to present the George Gross Award to Steve Simmons. We know that Wayne Parrish brought Steve to Toronto, but we also know it was George's idea. You'll think about that one. Anyway, Steve Simmons, please.
Thanks, Paul. He stole my Berkey line, by the way. About a year ago, I was getting ready to come to this event, which has long been my favorite day of the year. My good friend Bruce Arthur was getting an award. One of my kids asked out loud, "How come you never get an award?" Before I had a chance to answer, my wife pumped in, as she tends to, and said, "It's obvious. Everybody hates your dad. You don't give awards to people everybody hates." Well, here I am, the hated one. And as I look out today and see a lot of familiar faces, I can't stop thinking about my dad, who would have loved this, loved today being part of a room filled with sports talk and sports people. My dad was a successful manufacturer of women's clothing back when Canada did that kind of thing. But sports, that was his love, his passion. And I believe I inherited that from him, the passion and the hard work and the ability to do that. I'm thankful for him today, thankful for every day of my life, and wish he was still here with us. When John Iaboni called and told me about the George Gross Award, I was somewhat overwhelmed. pulled my car over, actually, sat in a parking lot on Steeles Avenue, and actually had a little cry. Crying because when you do what I do, when you say what's on your mind, when you take stands that aren't popular, when you take on stories that others would rather shy away from, you become, in nicer terms than my wife put it, a polarizing figure. Some like you, many hate you. Hopefully they read you. And in today's world of instant response, the negative can be overwhelming. But to stand here today with an award in the name of the founding sports editor of the Toronto Sun, an award won by the people I regard and respect most in the industry, many of them friends in here today, Steve Brunt, Cam Cole, Mike Farber, Al Mackey, David Schultz, Bruce Arthur, Pierre Lebrun, is humbling and overwhelming. It's meaningful to me to be honored with something with the name George Gross on it, because not only was he the founding sports editor of The Sun, but on the day I was hired, some 27 years ago, he turned to someone I know and said, as only George could, "I never would have hired that fucking guy." George, like a lot of people, didn't like me at first. But we came to be good friends and kindred spirits over the years. And being the first Toronto Sun scribe to be named Sports Writer of the Year, the old Baron, the inventor of this day, must be smiling somewhere. This is a hell of a time for our industry. Those of us in the newspaper business are trying to figure out where we are, where we're going, and what we're going to have to do to be successful. If you travel around, you'll see great old papers like the Boston Globe and the LA Times, and they almost feel like handouts rather than newspapers. They're that thin. I'm lucky to work for the Toronto Sun, for publisher Mike Power, for the sports editor, the best sports editor you could ever imagine, Bill Pierce, because they're swimming hard against the stream. Our sports section is the only one in North America getting bigger and better. They believe sports sells. The more, the better. And I hope their vision of the future is maintained. I'm touched that my Sun colleagues are here today, sitting at the back, by the way. I couldn't get them a better table. I'm also touched by so many of the nice things people have said to me. When you live in this Twitter universe, you don't get used to anybody saying anything nice. But one thing floored me more than anything else, when the guys I grew up with decided to buy a table and be here today. We played a ton of hockey as kids, ice hockey, road hockey, living room, don't break the furniture hockey. Do you remember that? My buddies, when we were growing up, they all wanted to be Bobby Orr. I was different. I wanted to be Frank Orr. The fact they've come together today from all over is a tribute I probably don't deserve, but I'm going to take it and enjoy it. Thanks, guys. Quickly, because I'm running out of time, I have to thank my 86-year-old mom for being here today and for never yelling at me for anything I write. There's a reason for that. She doesn't read anything I write. She hates sports, but she does brag about me a lot, so that's nice. My wife and boys, Jeffrey and Michael, are here, my support team. They don't always like what I write, two of the guys now in the industry, but it makes for good dinner time conversation. I love you guys. Special congrats today to the award winners, Bob McCowan, Joe Bowen, my dear friend, the late Mike Cassis, Dick Grimm, Cam Russell, each of them so deserving of recognition. I wish I had a few minutes to talk about each. I have some stories, but Iaboni tells me it's time to say goodbye. So goodbye and thanks to Steve McAllister and all the people at Sports Media Canada. Thanks to everyone who makes this great event possible. This has been my favorite day of the year for years. Just a little bit better today. Thanks.